when someone's misbehaving around you, you could do a couple of things, couldn't you? You might let them lead you astray. You start being naughty too. And actually, you'll probably end up getting in trouble, won't you? Or you can try and be a good influence on them. Well, in the Bible, we see that God's people are supposed to be a good influence on the people around them. But actually, we're going to look at Judges today. And what we see in Judges is that rather than being a good influence, God's people are led astray by the people around them. They get in lots of trouble, and God keeps needing to save them. That's what we're seeing in Judges. God saves, but his people get worse and worse and worse. So we saw last week that God's people are in the land. Way! But we see at the start of Judges that they don't completely drive out the evil Canaanites. They let them live among them. And that's going to cause lots of trouble. They're going to get led astray by them. Now, Judges, the same thing happens round and round and round again. I don't know if you hear the same thing again and again and again sometimes. My son loves a song, listening to it in the car, and every time we have to play it again and again and again, it gets a bit annoying after a while. Well, in Judges, we see the same thing happening again and again and again. It's a cycle. That's why I've got these arrows up here. We're going to see it goes round and round and round. It goes like this. The first thing that normally happens is that God's people sin. They sin. You'll see on that picture that there's some altars, and what God's people do is they build altars to and worship other gods. That's something they promised God not to do. That's something God told them that they should never do, because he saved them, he loves them, he's their God. But God's people sin. They follow other gods and they do evil. Well, what happens next? Well, just like God said when we looked at Deuteronomy, he said if you do that, you will be punished. When the people stopped following God and worshipped other gods, God actually let the other nations around them come and attack them and fight them and beat them. Sometimes they got raided, they got their stuff taken, and sometimes, well, you can see on the picture, they got put in chains and made slaves again. It was awful. Well, what did they do next? They cried out to the Lord. They said, "Sorry, God. We're sorry that we've messed up. We're sorry we followed other gods. Please help us. Please save us." And that's exactly what God did. God saves. God sent them a hero. He sent them a leader to save them. And those leaders were called judges. Now, when we think about judges today, we might think of someone with a funny wig and a gavel going, "Order, order," or saying someone's guilty or not guilty. But actually, in this book of the Bible, a judge is more likely to have a sword than a hammer. The judges were mighty warriors, people who saved God's people by beating their enemies. They were like generals. They chased away God's enemies, they freed the people so they could live in God's land in peace. And so when God saved them using these judges, that's what there was. There was peace. God's people got to enjoy the land. Sometimes they had peace for 40 years or 80 years. But after a while, what happened was the judge who'd rescued them, who'd saved them, died. And then guess what happened? Round again. They sinned Again, they worshipped other gods. They were punished again. They cried out and said sorry again. God saved them again with a different judge. There was peace. But then that judge died, round and round and round. But actually, it's not just going round and round and round. As we read Judges, it gets worse and worse and worse. It's a downhill spiral, like going down the plug hole. God saves, but his people get worse and worse. And the judges get worse and worse. The first judge, Othniel, he's pretty good. The second judge, Ehud, he has to lie to win. Then the next judge, Deborah, she has to stick up because all the men are being pathetic, so she has to step up. Then there's Gideon. He's a massive wimp. It takes him ages to trust God, and at the end of his life, he ends up killing people and worshipping a false god of gold. Jephthah, the next judge, he does even worse. And then the final judge, you will have heard of him, Samson. Samson was not a very nice guy. He saved his people, yeah, but he's arrogant, he's violent, he doesn't keep his promises to God. He gets led astray really easily. That's Judges. It's a bit grim, isn't it? What a shame. God's people could have been enjoying God's land in peace forever, but no. They keep getting led astray. They keep sinning. God has to keep saving them. But right at the end of Judges, this is what it says. Let me just grab my Bible. It's summarised about what the problem is in Judges. It says this: in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone that did as he saw fit. Israel is God's people, the Israelites, that's what they're called. But the problem is they don't have a king, they don't have a leader to bring them back to God. They need a king who'll save them. They need a king who won't sin. They need a king who won't die and leave them so that they go back through this cycle again and again and again. They need a good, powerful king who will live forever. And Christians know this king. That king is Jesus. Christians believe that Jesus came to save us from our sin. Christians believe that Jesus took the punishment we deserve when he died on the cross. So Christians believe that when we turn to God, when we say sorry, when we turn away from our sin, well, that God saves us. He forgives our sin. And so when we trust King Jesus, we know that we can have peace forever. Through King Jesus, God saves so we can have peace with God and each other forever.